Hello, everybody. Welcome to the January 12th work session of the Talbot County Board of Education. We're here at TCEC. And as you can see, we have a quorum. Everybody is here tonight, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our work session. If you could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be great. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We did not have a work session in December, so there are no work session minutes to approve. So we're going to go right ahead to our topics for this evening, which is the FY27 budget presentation.
All right, so good evening, everyone. All across the state, all LEAs, this is the season of budget requests, already looking into the new school year. So what you will see tonight is our budget presentation, and at the end, any questions. But as we're going through this, please stop us if there's any questions, clarifications to what you see on the slide. So you could see where the timeline, how everything is laid out. We're right here with our proposed 2027 budget. Next, it'll be reviewed, preliminary state aid, January 19th, and then so on all the way to March 2026, where the Board of Ed makes the budget presentation to the County Council. So throughout this, there's just a lot of iterations, discussions, presentations as to what we have laid out for the fiscal year 27 budget. Continuation of the County Council introduces it. May, June 15th. Work session based on the final budget appropriation from the County Board of Ed approves it, June 17th. June 30 will be when it's submitted for the State Department of Education. So a long process, like I said, with a lot of discussion back and forth with the County Council, hopefully not as much, but a lot of presentations also to the public, but a pretty tight process that's transparent, and that allows people to really see what we're doing and the goals we have set forth and the money that's tied to that. So we want to thank everyone for the support of this current year, which we're in fiscal year 26 request. We were here this time last year, and so again, looking into the next school year. So this is a summary. So asking for a contribution from Talbot County, $9.6 million above the required local share. Our unrestricted budget needs increased by 9.4 over the last year, which is what we're in now, fiscal year 26. The total, both unrestricted and restricted, is 8.1 million, which is 8.1% over the fiscal 26 budget. Now, you could see there 1.3 million in restricted grant funds are expiring in fiscal year 27. So, as we know, a lot of things we have used, operating came from grants. And so as we continue to move through the years, grants are expiring. And so you could see that's at the tune of 1.3 going into our next school year. Increases will enable us to continue promising what we said we're going to do to meet students here in our district. So if you can remember last year, we've kind of have 4 big buckets as we're going to walk through this presentation. The first will be strategic planning, next student enrollment, student performance data, which for us will be the one goal that we're talking about here, but we also have our strategic plan, priorities and goals, and then the blueprint. Remembering our vision and our mission, what we're grounded in, making sure that every student is valued, celebrated, and empowered to achieve their full potential, and then mission to succeed in college, career, and life. Having our 5 core principles, our strategic priorities listed there, making sure that what we're doing is still in alignment with all the things that we said we're going to do over the next 4 years in our strategic plan. And then our portrait of a graduate with our qualities that we want our students to have as they matriculate through our school system. Next factor that is considered when we're looking at our budget is our student enrollment, because the funds that we receive are tied to the students that we have here and the number of students that we have. Our 25-26 enrollment, and these are the slides that we show when we're out in the community, and we show when we're giving our presentations, so that everyone can see total enrollment, but also the breakdown of our special populations. And you could see there with the bar graph the numbers of who we have in our special populations.
Can I just point something out really fast? And I do this every year. All of these are all students in all grades except for gifted and talented, which only counts students in grades what through what?
That is gifted and talented are grades that get, I guess, specialized programming specifically for them.
Okay,
Like they're
so off the
tested.
top of my head,
No,
I
I'm
think that's-
asking, you're asking, so
Yeah.
they're
Right.
tested, they're tagged as such, and we have program for them.
Correct. And I think that's grade 3 through 8, if I am correct.
I want to tag that as yes, but I'm kind of looking over at Dr. Einhorn just to specify.
I believe once they're identified, they stay identified.
Okay. I'm only pointing out because all of the rest of those count pre-K or K through 12, whereas gifted and talented is a small segment because it's smaller. And so that number looks, I think, disproportionately smaller. I think it's actually higher if you consider all of the students who are still technically gifted and talented, but no longer identified as such in high school.
Yeah, but now that you brought that up, that I will dig into that just so I can get that clarification to make sure that that's clear.
I have a question. So free and reduced meals, that's like a little more than half, or at least half of our students, but they still get free breakfast, right? So was that inclusive in all of that too? Can you explain, like with the budgetary wise, is that a separate group or is it combined? How does that work with the money?
All of our students get free breakfast regardless of their income level of their family. We submit those claims, we get reimbursement for that it filters through the State Department of Ed. It's really USDA federal funding. But we also identify students who qualify for free and reduced meals because that would indicate that they are from a lower socioeconomic.
Okay, so the free is
Level.
not part of the free breakfast. That's what I'm really asking.
No,
That's
free
separate.
breakfast is for all, any student.
Okay, and I've captured the gifted and talented, so I can clarify what the number represents. Another visual of who we represent and who we support. On the one side, the demographic groups, and then again, the groups there on the right, which you saw some of those on the previous slide. Three subgroups here are farms, multilingual learners, and special education. And you could see here, over the last 4 years, pretty much the farm students has kind of flatlined. 24, I believe that percentage is 59, went up to 60, and then back down to 59% over those last 3 years there. And then with our student performance data, we have shown the strategic plan priorities, and next month we'll be at the mid-year point to be able to show comparison from baseline to mid-year what we have. But we wanted to tag the board goal here for kindergarten through second grade students improving their reading proficiency by 5%. So as we're talking about budgetary items, we want to see what things do we have, are we talking about looking at that could be tied to this. And then with the blueprint, you will see items in this budget that are coming and tagged to the blueprint, some funding that we're getting from the state for the blueprint. Some not 100%, all coming from the state, some funding that we still have to add to make that whole, even though it's still under the blueprint guidelines that we have to do. And of course, we had to have pictures of our students and our staff here. And so I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Jones to talk about the breakdowns of the different departments and the line items of what this request represents.
Can I back up a second? I don't remember, or I don't know if I know, what unrestricted versus restricted means.
So generally, when I'm giving a report on a monthly basis about our budget, it's our unrestricted funds. Grant funds are restricted funds, meaning they come in with some kind of stipulations about how they're to be used or when they're to be used. And so we track those in a totally separate fund. And when you start leafing through your budget book, they're among the very last pages. And you'll see all of our federal funds are there, so our big title grants, and then we get certain state funding, and then we get, and there'll be a slide later that'll kind of
Yeah.
summarize that. But that's what restricted funds are, grant funds.
So when you look at the summary, you could see how the total budget increases both unrestricted and restricted, 8.1. 1.3 restricted grant funds are expiring. And then the unrestricted, you could see 9.4 over last year's.
And they work in tandem. I mean, we can't run our school system as it runs right now without the combination of those two sources of funding. Okay, so big increase in our budget, $9.4 million. Why? Well, we're not trying anything. We're trying, of course, new things, but there's nothing huge. There's no huge new initiatives. Blueprint is steady on, so it's engaging in that and focusing on priorities, literacy. I'm going to highlight a few of the biggest increases, and we'll talk through these. And each one of these will have its own slide, so I'll just kind of let you have an overall view of that $9 million increase. And then we're just going to talk through them as we get to each slide. Salary increase, $4.2 million. As you know, last year we negotiated a 2-year contract with both our supports and certificated groups, and that was a 5.25% increase for our certificated and a 5.75% increase for our support, and each of those comes with a step. So that is reflected in these numbers. And that was done with the goal of getting those starting teacher salaries to $60,000 and providing appropriate increases for support staff as well. We also have identified a few new positions, a total of 11 positions outside of community schools. 9 of those are newly envisioned positions, and 2 of them are people currently on staff, or 2 FTEs are currently staff positions that are tied to funding that may be expiring. So we wanted to try to roll those into our local budget. Sure. That's the slide. And sorry, it's not a to total, but 11 to total. We have, those are the 11 positions that we're talking about. And some of these just, I guess, did not copy over well from the slide deck that we created this in, so sorry about that. But 1 elementary teacher, 1 high school English teacher, 1 special ed teacher, 4 special ed assistants, 1 payroll clerk who's currently paid for with a grant, the person who's in charge of our national board certification and other, I think tracks other licensing and certifications for our teachers. 1 instructional technology coordinator, that's supposed to read, and a pupil personnel worker, primarily to work with our expanding population of McKinney-Vento students. the reason I was a few minutes late was I actually have a very detailed list of those 11 positions, along with a justification, sort of a rationale, and some data in most cases to support that. So I'm just going to pass those down. If you'll take one, you can read them at your leisure, and then we can talk about them further at tonight, Wednesday night, at your leisure.
Did we not, I know last year we talked about including a position for grant writing. Was there any consideration of having that in the list?
That did not surface to the top 11. There were other requests. I don't remember where or if that fell on our list of requests. Yeah.
Related. We had a large number of positions that we had originally requested last year. And then we had backed off. And when it was clear that we weren't going to get enough funding for all of those, we had said, okay, well, we're going to put a pin in that and just move all of those requests to next year. And I did not bring my budget book from last year, but is this the continuation of last year, or are these different positions? Because they look some same, some different. And if it's completely different, I'm wondering why the priorities changed and what shifted from what was our most important things last year that we, really needed. Why aren't they on the list this year?
Sure. Well, I have a couple answers to that. There are definitely positions on here that were on last year's list that did not make the final cut last year. The ones that come to some of them are new needs. Could be based on class size. It could be based on schedule at a high school. It could be based on vacancies. Well, I mean, it's not really a vacancy, because if it's a vacancy, we would have kept it in the budget. It could be other objectives, like the special education, instructional assistants. Those are spread across 2 or 3 schools. So there are things going on at those particular schools at this point in time, or are foreseen for next year. And then I'd have to go back and look at those things. I mean, a couple of the ones I can think of from last year that didn't make the final cut, or if you will, I think just shifting priorities, knowing that this was going to be a tough budget year with the salary increases.
And I think too, that was the thinking, though, we had to get to 60,000 and we had the 2-year agreement, which bumped up our percentage. And then in talking to having monthly meetings with county manager, county council president, and knowing what they're hearing on their end, how the state is pushing more and more from state down to local. They're just basically saying it's going to be a very tight budget year.
So one of the things that we had 2 different student service positions last year. There was a supervisor of school counseling, and then there was another, I think, PPW supervisor. And so knowing that we needed additional support with students, we kind of dissected that down to what's the greatest need, and let's put in that request. So that PPW is sort of a reworking of 2 positions from last year, if you will.
What's the McKinney-Vento?
McKinney-Vento is another name for homeless, or not having a permanent place of residence, we'll say. They're not necessarily, many of them are living with family or just in a temporary living situation. Speaking of those positions from last year, we ended up with 15 positions that were approved in the budget, and I'm pleased to say that all 15 of those, with the diligent work under Dr. Horsey and all our hiring managers at our schools, we were able to hire and have all those folks on staff. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we dream big, and sometimes we come up with positions we'd really like to have but are really challenging to recruit for. And so that was not the situation last year. So some of those variances we talked about that are going into the over $9 million increase, one of the biggest ones is the staff health center, our Marathon Health Center. We have that in the budget this year, but just envisioning a few months of operating costs this year, versus next year, we'll have 12 months of operating cost. So that's a big jump. In FY28, we would anticipate starting to see some savings in a different line item in our health insurance line item. So to somewhat offset the cost of the operations of the health center. But it takes a while to get utilization, to draw people in, to start seeing results. So we did not factor in any health insurance savings. I do have some possible good news. We're going to investigate related to the final liquidation of the ESSER money. We just got a notification the other day, I think Monday a week ago, Tuesday a week ago, something like that, that we might have the possibility to apply for some of our things we'd originally put in the late liquidation request for ESSER. This was one of those things, so this might be an opportunity for us to make some savings in our budget at a later point. But for now, I wanted to put that in there.
Do we know yet when Marathon will open?
Yes, we're opening on January 28th, and this board is going to be taking a tour on January 20th at our joint county council meeting. Yep. It is fully staffed. We have a provider, and the 2 medical assistants have been on staff working at the Centerville location. Centerville location for quite a while.
Are
So-
the staff and those who are eligible to use it aware of the health center?
We're rolling out. We're in the midst of doing a campaign. Yes. Well, I'm not going to say they are fully aware. We're in the midst of a campaign. I'll just say that. Dr. Papkay's it's been talked about in meetings a lot.
And on my
But-
roundtables, that was on our slide. And we've received questions from staff members about that.
So it's come up a lot, but in terms of a final email push and a, hey, it's time, we haven't quite gotten there. It's coming very shortly.
Do we have a ribbon cutting scheduled?
Not yet. Soon. Sure, absolutely. Health insurance. This is a scary number. It includes a 7% increase. Dr. Horsey is working to get a better feel for what that number is going to be. She shared some news with me today. It is not good. 7% might be on the low end. Part of it is, just our particular experience with our particular patient population throughout the entire ESMIC Health Alliance. It's not just our staff, it's the whole Health Alliance staff. Part of it is just what's going on with rates in general. And part of it is effective January 1, the state of Maryland has a new way that they determine hospital rates. It used to be called the total cost of care, and I think now it's called a head or something. And basically, total cost of care had been in place for a very long time, and it had really, in theory, kept our hospital rates down compared to a lot of other states. And so this, I know our health advisors, Bolton, are pretty nervous about this new pricing model. So at any rate, we've factored in a 7% increase. And if we can bring that down at some point during the budget cycle, we will. Big increase in retirement cost. That's 2 things. One, retirement is directly tied to increase in salaries. It's a percentage of salaries. So as salaries go up, retirement costs go up. The second factor there is beginning last year, and not just beginning last year. There's a historical precedence for this, but particularly starting last year, one of the budget things that happened during the General Assembly is the local education agencies are now having to pick up a greater share of retirement cost, and the state is contributing less. So there is a share between what we pay and what the state pays for our teachers. We pick up 100% of the cost of our support staff, but the legislature is pushing more of that teacher cost, which is a far bigger cost, more toward us. So not only is the base, the salaries going up, but also the percentage we apply to that base going up. So that's a big number. Summer school, minor increase. Last year, as you know, we budgeted very light on this, as we had sort of a light program. This year's summer school would be focused on credit recovery, special education, ESOL services, and K-2 literacy interventions. The STEP program will continue. As you may remember, that's a rotating program. It is not our turn to host, but we will be providing, I think, 1 or 2 individuals for that program from our county.
What did we originally budgeted for that last year before we, essentially cut it out? Like when we were planning initially a full summer school program, what sort of cost does that look like?
I don't recall the timing of how all
For the
that-
summer career
Yeah.
you're talking about?
I mean, I can tell you when we had ESSER funds, we were spending in excess of $300,000 a year. Yep.
At that point, it was just more students were invited to participate, correct?
Yes.
And the larger budget spending for summer school back post-COVID.
Right. I mean, another simple factor we have for this coming summer is we have limited places to offer it, in the sense that Easton Middle School is going to be having a roof put on, chapel's still under construction. So a couple, like Easton Middle School is a pretty big hub where we had some programming, so that's not going to be an option for us.
Is there something like we could partner with like the YMCA on?
Oh, we do. The YMCA kids, we do.
So it will be held at Dorchester for the 6th to 9th grades, or is that
That's
just the
that
enrichment?
special SCEP summer continue career exploration program.
Yeah,
So
it's yeah.
I understand the focus will be K through 2, but what about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Especially our ELL.
Yeah, that's
learners.
all at the first bullet. Yeah, that's the first bullet. It's going
That
to
is the
cover all
focus.
the
Where
other
will they
grades.
be?
We plan to hold summer school at Easton Elementary School and on the St. Michael's campus, and I guess a little bit at Easton High School.
Will middle school students be offered to go to Easton High School if they are needing help with a subject matter, or that's just off the table for middle school students this year?
So we do have some middle school programming planned, particularly for students who need additional help in reading and math. And we'll determine where that location is, whether it's at Easton Elementary or at Easton High School as we get closer.
It's been a while since we removed the program, but I would love to see a move back towards doing, and I forget what it was called, but the AP boot camp, whatever that program was. I think it just got rave reviews and was very helpful. And then we pulled it out during COVID, maybe. I'd like to see a move back if there is interest. Obviously, you have to have it staffed. I think that probably would be the key, but yeah, I'd love to see more of that.
Is this going to be a half-day program like previous summer schools? Okay.
Does summer school provide a meal too?
Yes. Summer school does. Not only do they provide meals, but also during the summer, we offer meals for pickup. So a family can come through and pick up meals, not unrelated to summer school. You don't have to participate in summer school to get a meal.
Is that then a separate budget item other than the 49,000?
That all flows through the food service fund. It's not even part of this budget. The food service fund is probably the second to last page in your budget book. It's actually quite profitable. It does fine. You'll hear some other school districts have, big deficits in their food service fund. We do not.
And how are the middle schoolers and high schoolers identified if they are going to do summer school? Is it if they're failing?
So we work closely with the schools and the counselors to determine which students will be participating. It's all based on their data and how they've achieved academically. At high school, credit recovery is offered for students who fail courses, so that will continue as we've done in the past.
What about the Edmentum program? Does that part of it?
That is part of the credit recovery for high school students.
I guess I'm concerned that the 49,000 that you have in there is an incredibly low number when we look at, the challenges that our students are having with their proficiency. It seems like a really low number.
That's, it's not, it's nine, I think the total amount is, it's about 130,000. That's the differential between this is the increase from last year to this year. It's not just 49,000. I know, off the top of my head, I remember we have 95,000 budgeted for teacher salaries. I think 29, 30, something like that for transportation. There's some fixed charges, some things like that. And materials of instruction.
Okay, and could we get more information on how many students you think would be eligible or able to participate in summer school?
We can certainly get that information for you.
Thank you.
And that would be, I'm thinking just our assessment wise. So we're at mid-year now. So they'll take another wave of assessments. So that last assessment will be the pinpoint. So we'll be able to see where students are ending the school year. So then we'll be able to have those numbers.
So is that based on the MAP assessments
Yeah,
then?
MAP, DIBELS, our internal assessments. That's really what we have.
Okay, great, thank you.
Could we also get more information on the Edmentum? I'm just not real clear on that. And what I've heard about it are not great things. For example, a child fails and then is able to make it up in 2 weeks on a computer. And I don't know if that's correct in understanding, but if not now, but I would just let maybe a presentation on that.
Okay, so after summer school, another increase is community schools. I've just want to remind the board that the money we get for community schools is from concentration of poverty funding. It is restricted by school, and it is restricted for the purposes outlined and identified at that particular school as to what their needs are. So we can't use COP funding to supplement, paying classroom salaries or paying operating cost of a particular school. It needs to be tied into the needs of the students and families within the community around that school. So I just want to mention that. So the community school funding that's increasing by 434,000, that means our funding is increasing by 434,000.
On the slide there, you have all except White Marsh. Is that because they're entering their first year?
No, it just, the way the math works out, White Marsh is hovering right at the bottom farms percentage at which they even qualify to be a community school. And as such, it's kind of like when I was going to give an IRS allegory, but I won't do that. At any rate, they're just hovering at a percentage that doesn't provide them any funding. They might get $1,000, but my understanding is they're really not going to get any. And frankly, Easton High School will get some. I feel like they get around 20,000 and maybe 20. It's 16, 17,000, and Tillman is getting very little too, under $10,000, maybe $8,000 or $9,000. Really, Easton Middle and Easton Elementary are the ones getting significant per pupil funding, but they have much higher farms percentages.
The bilingual secretary, is that to replace the young lady that moved out of the area at Easton Middle, or is that in addition?
This is a new position in addition. The reading interventionist would also actually be at Easton Middle School. And the community school supervisor, you'll see in your data, I mean, we're getting ready to, next year we'll be up to $2.6 million. It's just becoming a program. It's not a program we want to run in 5 separate silos. It's a program that needs oversight. There's a lot of reporting. There's a lot of aspects to managing and that grant that would benefit from the synergy of having one person to kind of manage all 5 sites. Materials of instruction was really pretty flat. We had pretty significant savings in the materials of construction that we buy centrally in this office because, as you remember, for this year, we had purchased and rolled out a lot of new curriculum for math and ELA. So we had significant savings there. But community schools has really upped their game and what they want to be buying for materials of instruction. And again, that's There's funding coming in for that. But when you're just looking at it on the expense side, the savings from Dr. Einhorn's department kind of are offset by the increase at the community schools. Technology, devices, and software, big increase here. The biggest increase is in the final bullet on that slide. We have there's a certain rotation, Steve, how many years how often, every 5 years? Every 5 years, basically a building gets their access points and their switches replaced. That's our policy. And so we have some big campuses due for that next year, Easton High, this building, and the St. Michael's campus, both the middle high and the elementary. So that's a big cost. What I will say is we do have some grant funding available to offset that cost. So that 1.7 million is actually only 1.2 million. $1.2 million of cost. And again, that $1.1 million is an increase over the prior year. So you're saying why 1.1 and she's saying 1.2. Also, we have an increase in our software as well, some of our software, and we're going to talk about that on a later slide. We actually have some savings in our school security. As you remember, we rolled out the new school strategic security system this year. This year was a higher cost because it had those one-time implementation cost of buying the equipment. Next year, it's just the monitoring of that. So that was actually a cost savings. Bus leases are up. As you know, we frequently...
Can I pause you for a second
Sure.
on school security? We had talked about metal detectors, and I think at least for the high school, if not the middle school, and I know other neighboring counties have that. So I guess I'm curious why we never had any more information on that, or why I don't see anything about that.
So the
in
last
this
information was, I
segment.
know Dr. Horsey had met with the safety team, and the recommendation was to hold off, but if that's a request, then we can definitely price it out. And
I know.
we'll just add
I'm
it.
concerned about that too. And I know that they already have the wands, so it wouldn't be a cost. They already have the wands. So I think it's just doing our due diligence to be safe, especially at these games. I mean,
Yeah.
if they already have it.
Well, you can't wand everyone coming into school.
Stadiums worth of people, you'd have to have a walkthrough. But
So we can add that.
I know at least one neighboring county has portable walkthrough units.
So we could price that out and add that.
I think it's at least worth looking at.
I think we're talking about a few different things because we have talked about safety at games before, which was for the
Yes.
portable, and I think that we had heard that the wanding is the most efficient coming into the stadium. But I also would be interested in the there's been massive increases in just the technology around doorway ones, whereas it's not the old like airport style that everybody necessarily knows. It's as simple as walking through a door in some cases. Anyway, I'd be curious to know what cost we would be looking at for our high schools or per door, so we could consider high school, middle school, and also our sports arenas, whether wanding is the most efficient, what that cost would be, because I think it's two different things.
Okay, so we'll cover both of those.
Bus leases, it seems like every year one of the ways we end up making some cuts in the following year's budget is we prepay some of the next year's payments that would be due in the prior year. And that's what's going on here. Our 2026 bus lease budget is artificially low because we made some of the payments that would have been due this year in a prior year. So when we get back to normal again in 2027, it seems like a big increase. It really only includes one additional bus. So it's not that we're buying a bunch of buses. It's just we had a couple years ago where we bought 9 new buses. We are still making payments on those buses. Next year, I think, might be the last year that we would have those due. And then we have a group of 3 from this year. And then we have a one that we would be buying next year.
At some point in the past, and I don't know if it was 2 years ago or 6 years ago. It could have been any. We were given a list of the buses that we have and when they go out of service, so we could kind of look ahead and anticipate. Could we see that list again, just so we
I think
have?
I attached it to a weekly. Yeah,
just
I
came
I
out
sent it to
recently.
a weekly, yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
thank
I
you.
sent it out.
Do we know if the opt-in helped as far as bus utilization and efficiency?
Yeah,
For the
that's something we could
buses.
follow up to look at the data on that to see if that had any kind of impact.
Next up, I was going to talk about minimum school funding. So in the fall, at our November meeting and our October meeting, we talked about minimum school funding. We put up charts. We saw some numbers in red. That was the area where we were having some difficulty meeting our minimum school funding requirements. And I requested, and the board voted to approve a waiver application for us for this current year. And then right after that November meeting, when you made that vote, literally 2 days later, the AIB extended the deadline till March. So I have not filed that waiver, just as an FYI. I'm waiting a bit because it may be, I just want to see, how our actuals are playing out. And it may be that we can, it may be there's a change to what we would need to request. So that being said, the way the law is written, this was a year with some flexibility. As of next year, we're supposed to be fully compliant, meaning all of our funding programs, you take 75% of the amount of money given to a school under a funding program for most programs, and you have to have spent that at that school in that program. So what I have, go ahead.
A crazy question. So, if they are in 5th grade and they transfer to, okay. I think we talked about that too.
Yeah, it's always a challenge because you have that transition, and the funding is always based on enrollment counts from the fall of one year, and it applies to next year. So yeah, if you have a bubble, if you have a class that's really small or really large, moving from middle school to high school, elementary school to middle school, it causes problems. Yeah. Challenges, opportunities. So I'm going to go through these very quickly. I'm just going to kind of use the Easton High as an example and explain to you how this works. See if I can get my pointer to work. So on the top row of each of the charts on the following pages, this is what I am projecting the revenue will be under each of these programs: the foundation program, comp ed, multilingual, special ed, community schools, which is also concentration of poverty is the other name, pre-kindergarten, college and career ready. Not every school has every source. For example, Easton High School does not have pre-kindergarten funding, as you can expect. And when we get to an elementary school, they will not have college and career ready. But this is the funding given to Easton High School. So understanding that it doesn't just take the people in that building to make these programs run. I mean, some of the money has to be to pay for things like buses and, people here in this building. We are given a target of 75%. So for the most part, these numbers are 75% of the numbers on the row above it. And this is our minimum school funding requirement. The one exception is in the community school funding bucket. We have to spend 100% of what we get for community schools at that particular school. So the third line is the way our budget is playing out right now. This is what you're seeing, our 2027 budget by school. And finally, this is, are we meeting or not meeting the minimum school funding? So in this case, our proposed budget is 10.9 million for activities that would qualify under the foundation. Our target is only 8.3, so we're exceeding that, i.e. we're meeting or exceeding, we're in good shape. So when you see a number on the bottom line of this chart that is in red, that means that's an area where we are not meeting that requirement. So what I will say before I move on is, in general, this chart looks far better than these charts would have looked this time last year. We're in far, far better shape. We have, I think our biggest area of challenge still is in the multilingual area, particularly in our outlying schools, not our, our non-Easton schools. So these are just things to be aware of. They're things we do need to work through. So you can see at Easton Elementary School, we are not either spending enough actually in pre-kindergarten, or I need to look at exactly who's charging there. I mean, we went through a very detailed staffing review. We did a lot of, based on that staffing review, we changed where people are charging so that it matches where they're working and what they're doing. But there may, when all is said and done, we may still have a small issue or two. We'll continue to look at this. It does need to be addressed. So you'll see at Easton Middle School, for example, we are underspending. We are not meeting our multilingual learner minimum school funding by $154,000. But
Would the new multilingual staff fall into that bucket?
yes, no, it doesn't. And here's why. And that's exactly illustrates the point I was going to make, which is really Dr. Einhorn's point. At a community school, a lot of the work that we're doing, at least at Easton Elementary, Easton Middle, Easton High, we're working with our multilingual population. And so there's a lot of crossover. So if it turns out everybody's coded correctly and this is how it ends up working at Easton Middle School, and we don't have additional resources or don't feel it's necessary or appropriate to spend additional resources at this time on multilingual programming, we might apply for a waiver. And as part of our waiver request, we might say, however, in our community schools, here's what we're doing. We have a family liaison who works only with or primarily with international students. We have this position and this position and this position. So we're serving the needs, but it's being paid for with another funding source, if that makes sense. So, it's nuanced. Yeah.
We have a relationship, and I might have asked this before, and I apologize. I don't remember. Do we work with the Multicultural Center?
Yes, very much so.
And I know they're short-staffed as well. They're desperate for help.
Yeah, no, very much so. So again, when you have a small population like St. Michael's does of multilingual learners, it's, again, we just need to look at all of what we're doing, and is everybody being charged appropriately according to what they're doing. St. Michael's Elementary School appears to be fully compliant. White Marsh has that multilingual learner question, and also pre-K. So again, that amount in pre-K, and there's only a couple pre-K classes down there. I strongly suspect that might be an instructional assistant who is being charged to compensatory education or something like that. So this is, a couple follow-ups for me to look into. A little bit short on multilingual at Chapel, and Tillman, almost on target with everything. So that's that. That was a new exercise for us to go through at the budget stage. We've been doing it sort of on a monthly basis as part of our monitoring process. But it's important that we're developing our budget with all of that in mind. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. We have 13 categories of how we classify expenses. I won't go through the explanation of every one of these, but in your budget book, this page exists and it explains, well, what do we mean when we say administration? These are the types of costs that are in these, each department. And I'm just going to point out, administration is up $139,000, $140,000. The salary increase is due to a step in COLA that we already talked about, and one new position request for a payroll accountant. There is savings in the consulting line because we had a survey this year. that we're not going to do again next year. It was a one-time thing. And just some other consulting we're cutting back on. Small increase in the travel meeting expense because the board has decided every other year they want to attend a conference, and next year's the year. This is our principals and our school-based staff, as well as our much of the staff in this building. Mid-level management. Increase in salaries of $738,000. We have several of the new positions that we're requesting fall under this category. The community school coordinator and the community, what's the other community school? Oh, the community school bilingual secretary would be in this department. A student services coordinator to assist our current student services staff and work with McKinney-Vento students. An instructional technology coordinator. And kind of questioning whether that position belongs here. It probably belongs more in instructional salaries, but that was a very last minute thought I had. So I may move that out of mid-level into instructional salaries if we keep that position in. And then we have a coordinator position to work with our teachers who are pursuing MBC and also just helping them with other licensure requirements. And then some savings, $10,000 cutting back on professional development and about $20,000. We, TASA, staff members are eligible to do a certain amount of professional development, and so but it's a moving target, and we've scaled this back based on what we've seen expended in more recent years.
Does anybody need a clarification on what TASA is?
Sorry, good point. Great question. Talbot Administrative Supervisor Association is how I'm going to. Principals, assistant principals, and curriculum supervisors would be members of TASA.
So there was a savings there, so they weren't meeting as much? What was the savings?
They have, within their contract, they have the right to attend professional development. They have a conference they want to go to. They have a meeting they want to attend. They have a course they want to take. And they have a limit, $1,500 every 2 years that they can avail themselves of. But, obviously not everybody does. And they've got other things they're doing, maybe that are free or just, they're not using that money. So we just scaled it back to match more in line with what we've been seeing in actual cost. Instructional salaries. These are salaries of all teachers and instructional assistants that are not in the special education classrooms or special education setting.
Have we reviewed our, I know it's not a salary, 'cause if I remember correctly, for our substitutes, was that included, any pay raise with that in this? Or considered at all? And does it need to be considered? Because I hear that periodically is like, I don't get paid enough to substitute.
I can tell you, Mike, we looked at it a lot. It's come up quite a bit. It's a tiered system. It depends on whether you have an AA degree, a high school diploma, a full
So I don't
degree.
know how to answer that when people say, come to me about.
I can tell you, I did not spend hours on that budget. It's a line item, and I'm like, that looks about right, based on what we've spent in the past. So it's really more of a historical thing. We did make an effort, particularly during the pandemic, to really raise those rates. So we had done that work then, and I don't think we've revisited it in the last year and a half, something like that. We do increase them. I don't know if they increased this year, but they are reviewed at the time we're doing salaries in the spring every year. I don't recall if there was a significant increase or not.
But to Mrs. Jones's point, it depends on how you come in on that scale. So if you're coming in, sometimes we have certified teachers, and a certified teacher pay rate would be different than a person with a high school diploma. So it does vary. I will tell you, we're kind of about the same range as our partners around us in our other districts.
I hate to even say it because I'm afraid I'm going to jinx something, but we're doing okay currently for subs, right?
I'll just say okay. We are doing okay with subs. We're still getting subs in, but we are doing okay with them.
So instructional salaries went up just under $2 million. That's the step and COLA increase. And then new positions in this department are one elementary teacher, one high school English teacher, a reading interventionist or reading coach, and a student services coordinator.
That reading interventionist at Easton Middle, is that, I know we were looking for that job a year or two ago. Is that, did we fill that? Is this in addition to what we were previously looking for?
So once upon a time, we had 2 reading interventionists approved at Easton Middle School. We filled one. The other one has not been filled and had kind of fallen by the wayside. So you could look at it as sort of reinstating that second reading interventionist position.
Makes sense to me.
Does this have to do with the media center at the high school? That they had to close the media center because the librarian had a class to teach and students couldn't go into the library to use it? That they were actually being told they can't go in there during the school day. So I thought they were addressing that need.
The high school English teacher is addressing that need.
So she will be the librarian, or that's what
No,
we're
so
hiring?
we will be hiring a high school English teacher to address that issue.
Okay, and then there will be a librarian in the library that will be open for the students to go in and do work.
Correct. And again, you've got a lot of detail in front of you to, digest. And if you have more questions as you're digesting that, we can revisit that. Instructional supplies, we've touched on this. Again, overall, pretty flat, $22,000. And it's that savings in Dr. Einhorn's department offset by some additional materials of instruction that the community schools are planning to purchase. They net to a positive $22,000. A few miscellaneous things too. Instructional other, this is where our under line 5.2 contracted services, where you see that $446,000 increase, that's where software lies. So all the software that we use instructionally, as well as the software we use in this, just to make all of our systems work, all of our security software, all of that, are part of contracted services, as well as consultants and other contractors. And then on line 5.5, land, buildings, and equipment, you see that big, almost $800,000 increase. That's that increase for not only our annual purchase of iPads and laptops, but also these fairly significant, in the rotation of things, replacement of switches and access points at 3 major areas within our school system next year.
I have a question about consultants. We did a salary study last year, I assume, with a consultant. Are we doing anything similar this year? What consultants are we planning on using? Is that
So this is, the salary study was way back in, so these are different types of consultants. So some in her budget, she can talk to you about those.
So, for example, when we hire tutors for elementary school, they are considered in the contracted service areas because they are not full-time employees with us. So we do have funding in here to continue the tutors at elementary school, as well as some funding for tutors for middle or high school when we determine those needs and can find people to fill those positions. So that would be an example from my budget.
So we're calling tutors contractors?
That is correct, because they do not work full-time, so they complete contracts with us for a specified number of hours at a specified hourly rate.
That's great. Thank you for the clarification. I would look to increase any budget line item that goes towards tutoring for our kids. So if there is anywhere that we're looking to make increases, sorry, Sarah, that would be one line item I'd be looking for it.
That was not what I was expecting, but. Okay. There's some tutoring in community schools budgets as well as what's in Dr. Einhorn's budgets too. So that's that.
For some of that tutoring, again, do we outreach to community resources, say for example, like Eastern Utilities, and ask for somebody who might be willing to come in and volunteer to teach some financial?
Well, this is, I think,
So this tutoring is specific to the standards. So for example, tutoring this year is really focusing on literacy. So we have tutors who come in and get training, or are former teachers who are familiar with the science of reading, and also support from our reading intervention and coaches to ensure that they are implementing interventions with fidelity.
So where is that number? Or that's what we're proposing? Like, where is that number of how many tutors we're getting? How much is that going to be? For how many students? I mean, that's the part that I'm interested in.
Basically, this number equates to this many tutors, which will serve this many students. Okay.
we can get back on that. Moving on to special education. We have $1 million increase. Step and COLA for staff, 5 new positions, 1 teacher. I'm trying to think where that teacher might be located. Don't recall off the top of my head.
For Easton Elementary.
And 4 instructional assistants, and those are spread across 2 or 3 elementary schools. I think 2. I think we did a swap for that one. So, also in special ed, I was kind of struck that the dollar amount of instructional assistants had gone up a lot, and it wasn't quite all making sense to me. And then I recalled in the fall we did a significant staffing review, and what we found in a lot of instances was we had dated information in our financial system as to roles that instructional assistants were playing within our school system. So there were a lot of instructional assistants working in a special ed classroom environment, and we were charging them elsewhere. So we tidied that up. So if you pay attention to the instructional assistant line up in category 3, which is the non-special ed classroom, you'll see that number seems to have gone down. And the special ed classroom went up. It's not, we didn't transfer anyone. I mean, people were doing what they were doing. We just kind of finally caught up with that in terms of charging them appropriately. So that happened. Also in special ed under contracted services, that's almost exclusively contracted nursing services. We have a few students that require nursing care while they're in our schools, and we do not employ nurses, we contract with nurses.
The health department.
No. The health rooms we have on site are through the health department, and they're providing general care for injuries, for acute illness, diagnosing, referring for anyone in the school. These special ed nurses are specifically for very specific high medical needs of certain students.
And do they follow them all day? Are they with them the entire day?
Yes.
Were these increases born out of the special ed study that was done? I can never remember the acronym of the group that came in. Thank you.
What was that acronym?
MCIE.
Maryland Center for Inclusive Education.
Was this born out of that work and or the special education committee work that has taken place? Like, where was this recommended by? I'm curious how we ended here with this as the best movement forward.
Well, we've certainly added, I mean, in this year alone, I could go back and look, we added heavily both in multilingual and in special ed. And special ed, it's like, when I think about our new position request in the 5 years I've been here, there have been a lot of special ed. So clearly we are providing more resources, and I think we're seeing results for it. So, and, you know, yes, it comes out of, Ms. Menchez comes in, I think, to the May meeting and does her special ed staffing report. I may not be getting the title right, but with recommendations about needs, and that translates into the requests that for new positions or shifts in positions that we see and are reflected in this budget.
The reason I ask is because when we requested to start the special education committee a couple of years ago, part of the objective was to spend some time really digging in on this, on special ed needs to revolutionize our special ed program, to modernize our special ed program, to bring us up to speed in some areas that maybe we had fallen behind a little bit. And in conjunction with that, MCIE, did I get that right, came in and we said, we're going to spend a year really digging into this. And so I'm kind of hoping for someone to say, this is the result of all of that work that has been put in. This is what they decided we're missing. This is going to revolutionize our program.
I think it's that, but I also think it's the state that did a full audit as well as our data and looked at it. I think so it's coupled with both. I think it's MCIE and also the state overviewing what we're doing here. But I will say, also hearing and looking at our staffing models and how we're staffing our classrooms, we're making those adjustments. And when we did we got our state feedback from our blueprint, we have seen growth in our special ed subgroup population.
And also, special education committee has only had 2 meetings, like at all. So we haven't dug into this piece of it yet.
I think that's a great monitoring piece as that keeps moving down the track.
So, and you'll see in the justification and the data for the supports, it speaks to some of that. Particularly, there's, you know, it talks for the instructional assistants about how they're being requested to implement MCIE at, I think, additional grade levels, and the special education teacher is being requested based on review of staffing and needs.
I think too, though, but I don't want to kind of paint a picture that having the planning committee may mean more staff. It may mean also shifting who we currently have in other areas. So
I think I am just looking for to hear not justification necessarily, but that the work that we put in amounted to something. You know, that we spent a year saying, what are you going to tell us? What are you going to hear from you? And that this is it. You know, that their recommendation based on spending a year with us is that we do this. And I think that it kind of helps in that budget request to say, this is not just a number we pulled out of the sky because we really like the number 4 for instructional assistants. This was based on data and best practice by a group who does this specifically.
In addition to that, I would like to hear how it was rolled out. How successful was it? I know it was a scramble in the beginning of the year when this rolled out. I feel like the special ed teachers weren't prepared for how it was coming, and I know then it kind of evened out. But I would like to hear from them how is it going now?
and we can definitely do an update on that.
How is assessment handled? How are students identified for special education? Is there an aspect that is done through the school system, or are people expected to go outside for that?
There's a process within our school system for students to be identified. And in addition to that, this board has invested in educational diagnosticians. So we have 2 individuals in the county whose primary responsibility is to do the educational testing for students we're looking at as possibly qualifying for special education. So we have some quality control about how those assessments are completed. So we've been proactive in trying to ensure we have the staffing for that.
But if the student, from personal experience, if a student has a disability, depending on the disability and what grade level they're at, then that depends on what help they get with testing.
I'm sorry, did you mean testing within the classroom or assessment?
State assessments.
That's, I think, a different question than Ms. Jurius was asking.
Right, I think you're talking, Amy, about accommodations for like state testing and other types of testing. And I was asking about how students are identified in the first place as eligible for special education, and Dr. Einhorn answered that as far as the diagnosticians on staff who are able to do that.
And Ms. Jurius, I want to clarify, there's a process before they even get to that stage through our MTSS process where we are looking at student data on a regular basis to see which students may be struggling more than others and trying to assess the reason for that as we are implementing like reading interventions. If students are not responding to the reading intervention, then we move them to the next level to see whether or not they would qualify for special ed. So it's a longer process than just getting to the educational diagnostician, but it's pretty comprehensive.
Is the MTS MAP testing, what was the MTSS?
Yeah, so MTSS is the multi-tiered systems of support, and that's something that we are making sure we're refining. So that's the system that the team of staff members sit around the table to look at the data, to look at the interventions, to see what the data collection looks like before we then get to the next step of saying, okay, what do we need to do based on this data?
And is that fairly new? The
Yes.
MTSS?
Yes, yep.
Still hearing about, like, that's in process, so that we're not going to
Correct.
see those results.
Well, that's the process in which all the discussions take place and all the data collection, so that it's just not one teacher just coming saying, I need this. It's a whole process that has a team of people that look at everything.
The next department is pupil personnel or student services. And that's a pretty lean department because most of the two pupil personnel workers that we have, the psychologists that we have, some of the other folks we have in that department, really their salaries are not reflected in that department. They're in instructional salaries because they're working in the classroom with students and working to ensure that students are coming to school and engaged. So this just reflects the salary of a few people. It's a very flat budget. The salaries and wages increase is really just a step in a COLA for the staff that are in there. And there's a little bit more software that used to be covered under a title grant that they don't think they can fit into that title grant next year. It's the same software we continue to use, just picking it up in locally. Student health, this is, to answer a question earlier, our health centers are not in our budget. In our local, in each school, the health department provides those nurses to us, so they're in their budget. And their health department nurses. However, we do have a contract with the health department for 2 of their nurses, and that's what you see reflected here under contracted services. Those are nurses in addition to our normal health department nurse who work in our health centers at Easton Elementary School and at Tillman Elementary School, and that's because we have after-school programming. Well, first of all, at Tillman, we did not have a full-time nurse. We had a nurse from St. Michael's who was splitting her time, and we felt like it would be better to have a full-time nurse, and frankly, it's a requirement of a community school to have a full-time nurse on site. So we've contracted with the health department to provide that nurse at Tillman, and also, we have a nurse at Easton Elementary School because we're running after-school programming every day there, and we have to have a nurse after school there. So she's bilingual, which is great for that building, and she comes in a little later and stays a little later. So she's there servicing students during the day, but also after school, as well as families, if families are coming in. So very flat, but just wanted to make you aware of that. Transportation, we have an increase in salaries and wages based on no new employees, but based on COLA and STEP. We have contracted services increasing a little bit, and that's we trued up a few things this year. We found we were spending a little bit more on repair of buses than we had previously budgeted, and that was a consistent budget adjustment over the last couple of years, so we bumped that up about $20,000. Community schools, transportation, they provide transportation for after-school activities, enrichment activities, and they bumped up their budget, and so that flows through our transportation budget. Again, that community schools piece is fully funded by community school funding. And finally, our bus payments or our bus leases will increase next year due to the fact that we've paid down and budgeted very little for this year due to some prepayments. Operations. Again, we've got a standard STEP and a COLA. There is an error in that budget just within salaries. I have a person misclassified in FY27, so it appears there's a very large increase in the supervisor salary, and that's not true. I just need to move that person's salary from the supervisor down to the proper custodial line, and I'll get that fixed for you next time we go through this budget. And slight increase in contracted services of $40,000, which is just various things, snow removal, grass cutting, whatever, those kinds of things that we contract out. Slight increase there, about $40,000, but this is also the same area where we have this savings from being in year 2 of the Centegic school safety system. So they offset each other. We overall have a decrease of $46,000.
Does that number include the additional field maintenance that we had ramped up a couple years ago? Okay, so
Yep.
we're just kind of rolling along with that. That
Yep.
requires no continued additional costs.
Correct.
Great.
Yep. Maintenance, very, very flat. Nothing going on there except for no new people. That's just a step and a COLA on the salaries. Fixed charges, this is where all of our employee benefits costs live, and this is usually a very significant area of increase when we have increases in staffing cost. So we have a $3.5 million increase. We've kind of addressed this. Retirement costs going up because of those salary increases, because of the state legislature shifting costs toward us, away from them. Our health insurance claims are expected to go up by $2 million. Our employee health center will be open for a full year without expected offsetting savings yet in health insurance next year. And employment taxes go up when salaries go up. Last year, we had, for the first time since I've been here, a capital outlay category, and that we don't typically have that. It's to cover cost of construction and capital projects in the operating budget. Well, there's a whole separate fund for capital projects, the Capital Projects Fund, and the reason we had $475,000 worth of things in this capital outlay category last year was because they were things we identified that were one-time things we were going to use fund balance to pay for. So we had to sort of get them into our operating budget in some way. That was how we did it. I don't currently have anything recommended, identified for that type of arrangement this year. So that represents a decrease in that category of cost by $475,000.
So a new state category.
New to us, not new in general. Yeah, but it was new for us, yes, this year. Yep. So overall, there's that bottom line, right-hand column, $9.4 million increase spread across all the categories that we just went through. There's the.
Sarah, somehow I maybe missed capital projects.
This is current expense fund, and we're going to get there shortly. This is those same cost with that $90.9 million budget in the second column from the right. Just slice and dice the little ways. Salaries and wages versus contracted cost. Other charges is a different way of saying fixed charges, things like insurance and utilities and travel. But that $3.5 million increase in other charges is, again, it's all tied back to those employee benefits we keep talking about. So here is our revenues.
Sarah, can I ask a quick question? Can you back up one? Sorry.
Sure.
If you look at our fixed charges for the past, the budgeted and the actual for the past couple of years, they've gone up, but not as significant a jump as it looks like we are asking for this year. Is that because we have been lucky, or have we been overly cautious in our budget request, or is this just a really bad, expensive year?
Our health insurance increase, which is the single biggest increase in fixed charges, has been, it has ended up between 3 to 5%. And so right now we're budgeting 7%. There are some ways we can affect that through our Health Alliance. We can do some negotiating basically with them to hopefully bring that cost down. So we'll have to see. But we have not seen a 7% increase in health insurance, and that's really impacting that.
Sarah, before you go any further, I just have a couple of questions. I have been talking about the extreme gap in the proficiency of our Black and African American students. When I look at the budget requests, I really don't see anything at this time that could say that we are really addressing the gap. And I'm wondering, when I look at materials of instruction, I don't really see anything there that is really targeted towards this gap in proficiency. And also, when we look at our K through 2 students, I'm wondering where we're finding the line item to ensure that these students are ready for the 3rd grade mandate.
Question, and I'll let Dr. Einhorn jump in. One thing, and that's something that we look at with the gaps. I think there's a couple things. One, the tutors, who's getting the tutoring, and when we walk around, making sure we're looking at the students that are being targeted for the tutoring. 2, I think it's the curriculum that we are going to keep monitoring, that we got 2 years ago to monitor that has upped the rigor. So I think it's looking at, number one, who's in the group, and then with the second wave of data that we're getting ready to look at, we're going to see what has shown from when they walk through the door baseline to now, because that's really their second time testing, so we could see, are we seeing improvements with what they're doing from the beginning of the school year till now, which will be February, really. And then looking at, again, I guess, who are in those groups, and specifically looking at that subgroup.
Okay, that makes sense. I just don't want us to continue monitoring and then we're not implementing any strategies into that. And then I am looking at the English teacher request. I'm wondering if that English teacher, if you bring on that extra position, if that would allow more AP access for that specific, whether it's English or maybe another subject.
So when we bring the program of study to you next month, you will see our plan for additional potentially AP offerings for our students. We have built that training into our budget for teachers, anticipating that the board would want to increase our AP course offerings for students. So we do have a plan for that, and we'll be bringing forth the 2 new courses we're looking at for next year.
Other questions on expenses?
I just have one question. If you can please get me the demographics from last year and the year before to see how we're, like, is our student population growing or is it going down? And also with the special ed kids, I'd like to know what they're doing also.
Of special ed students? Okay. It's about 70 slides back, so I don't want to jump there right now, but maybe when we get done, I will take you back there.
So I have, oh, go ahead. So I have a question from what Ms. Jackson said earlier and Ms. Strawberry about the GT from middle school, that it ends in high school. So yes, AP, we have AP, but we have nothing. We've been talking about this for years. We have nothing going from 8th to 9th. So honors English or honors science, honors whatever. We don't offer. So would that be a possibility? In addition, that's what I would like to see, another teacher to offer that, or move teachers around for pre-AP English class, so they don't wait until junior year.
And again, one of the courses we are looking at to implement is the AP seminar course, which is an English class for 10th graders. So we're starting to see how we can move down that AP programming as they're building out their programs to our students earlier than we have previously.
I'd like to echo what Ms. O'Connor is saying, and this will come as no surprise to you. I've talked about this before for a long time. I would really like to see the inclusion of honors classes starting in our middle school and ramping up into our high school. I think it allows for that bridge between GT and AP, but it also just gives more academic opportunities to more kids, as honors classes don't always span the full year like an AP class does, and so an AP class can be very limiting when it comes to scheduling opportunities. Whereas an honors class may only be a semester long, but still provides that high level of rigor and interaction that some of those students are looking for. And I think also becomes a nice, again, bridge between a general education class and an AP class. We all know that our AP classes are very rigorous and very difficult, and I think that there is a world that exists between AP and general ed for a world of students to meet their needs better.
So our budgeted expenses are going up 90.9 million, going up by 9.4 million. Where does the money come from? So I'll call your attention to the column on the far right, and that is the change in the column directly to the left of it, total budgeted revenues for FY27, and then the 26 revenues are in the two columns to the left of that, right in the middle of the page. I don't currently know the breakout between local and state right now, so I just have to look at it in total by program. And I'll get those revenue estimates in a couple of weeks. So the next time we get together, I'll have those revenue estimates. And some of these may be slightly different. I think they're all, fairly close. That's been our
How do you
history.
break it down between state and local? I'm just curious.
They do it for us. There's formulas for everything.
So with, I hear Baltimore asking for $1 billion, and that just blows my mind why that can happen there, but we can't have it here on the shore in general, because I know Talbot's not alone in that battle. And then, I'm hearing on the news that Governor Moore is going to give an additional, I'm assuming it's additional, $10 billion. And, I want to see that so that we know that we are really getting that money or not getting that money, because then that's an issue for me.
Well, I mean, you couldn't probably pick a better contrast than Baltimore City. I don't know.
I get them confused. They're one and the same to me, so yes.
Well, the point is we get very little state funding. We get 22% on average, I think, state funding. with 78% coming locally. And, somewhere like Baltimore City is definitely the opposite of that. They're getting most of their money from the state. And it all has to do with the wealth of the jurisdiction, and that's taxpayer wealth. It's not even the wealth of the students in the schools.
And that's been a chronic history here in Talbot County. I remember that from years ago when I was a student. And it just, why can't it change?
Well, it's the Maryland funding formula. It's not up to Talbot County to change, how the formulas work and how it's split between the state and local. What the local government has the ability to do is really two things, is to fund us over and above what they're mandated to fund us.
So this is really above us to a point.
Yes. And the other thing, and there has been attempts, I can't remember the last time, I would say it was about 3 to 4 years ago, maybe we're in 2026. I'm going to say maybe on the 2022 ballot, there was a ballot question in Talbot County about removing the tax cap, and it was defeated. So with a tax cap, there is a limitation as to how much Talbot County government can increase our tax rate on our assessed property values, which is the primary source of income for them, funding education. So, short of changing that, and that's not something even they can do. It's in the charter. It's something that has to be done through an electoral process. Right there. So,
Can I ask a question? Sorry, did I miss the slide that talked about why compensatory education is going down $777,000?
I don't have a detailed slide on that, but what I can tell you about that is it's twofold. The per pupil amount decreased, and I was going to pull up, I think it was around $80 a student. Don't quote me on that, but it was significant. So that is the majority of the decrease. And then we lost about 80 students. So 80 times and change is, a decent amount of money. Yes, so that's that decrease. Our foundation program, the per pupil amount went up. So the per pupil amount went up. However, our 3-year average count of students went down because we're continuing to see declining enrollment. So those two kind of offset each other and netted to a $1.1 million increase. With compensatory education, neither worked in our favor, declining enrollment and declining per pupil amount. English learners, I need to look at that. There was, I don't recall off the top of my head why that went down a little bit. And I'm sorry, I'll have to look at special education. I can do a little quick and dirty, but I will say by the next time we get together, I also will have final official numbers too. These are my best estimates. Transitional supplemental instruction, that program went away. So that's $192,000 we had in this year's budget we'll no longer have going forward.
Was that program?
Transitional supplemental instruction was a program for high-dose tutoring in small groups to grades K through 3. So it was our elementary tutoring. So we were doing it, but we were getting funding for it. So we're going to continue to do it. We're just not going to get the funding for it. Pre-K, the amount per pupil went up. That's probably the number, the $3.8 million. That's the number I'm having the most angst about, if you will, in terms of my projection. We CFOs around the state have a common shared database we use to kind of come up with our numbers. That number is on the conservative end. The database would say that it's a higher number. I don't quite believe it, so I'm going low, and we'll see what the numbers come out. Concentration poverty, we've talked about the fact that we are, the per pupil amount for the schools getting per pupil funding goes up for it kind of gets phased in. So you're getting more and more money up till about year 7. I think it kind of caps out at 100% of the per pupil amount. And there's always an inflationary adjustment there too. Blueprint coordinator funding should be the same. National board certification, we went from having 15 to having 26 national board certified teachers, so we will get funding associated with that. Transportation, that is always affected by AR enrollment and B, we get an inflationary bump.
Does transportation include transportation to any of the CTE programs, or is that just pick up and drop off?
We don't get funding for that, but, so that's on the expense side. We do, yes, the costs are included in our transportation cost. We are funded a flat amount per student, K to 12. And then we also get an extra $1,000 for every special ed student that has transportation needs identified in their IEP. So that's about $79,000 next year.
I'm talking about the CTE programs, like in another county.
So we provide that transportation and we incur that cost, but we do not get any revenue for that. I guess you would, we don't get any revenue specifically tagged for that. We get a certain amount to transport students, whether we use that to get them to and from school or to get them from school to a CTE program in another county. It's not enough money to pay. We do not get enough money to pay for our transportation cost in transportation aid.
And cross campus as well.
True. Yes, correct. Our miscellaneous revenue, which is the last line item there, I feel like that's primarily interest income. There's a little bit of miscellaneous revenue from maybe selling some assets or that were retiring or something like that. So we've got, that leaves us with a $9.6 million ask we need to go to the county council for, probably. Top line there is the unrestricted budget we just reviewed. The number second from the right, the 90.9 million, that's what we've been talking about so far. In your budget book, you have 7 or 8 pages that go into a fair amount of detail on the numbers below that, which total $8.5 million. It's federal funding, state funding, local funding, and grants, private grants. Talbot Family Network, Midshore Community Foundation, Judy Center grants are all in here. And then all our federal title grants and a lot of special ed grants are up in here. So you have a lot of detail on those in your budget book.
Sarah, are those in jeopardy at this time?
We just updated all those grants with the grant managers and said, what is your best guess for next year? And that is how we have moved forward. It's uncertain times for sure. I mean, clearly what the trend we've been consistently seeing is down, 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 down. Look at that picture. Look at that. Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Lusher. It's great. So we have I think this is about an 8-year outlook. There were 2 new things on here that were not on the list last time we did this a year ago. I don't remember right off the top of my head what those 2 new things were. They weren't huge things, I don't think. But for next year, if you'll focus on those first 2 lines, we would just have 2 capital projects, and that would be roof replacement at Easton Middle School, and this building needs some TLC.
Can I ask for you to add a light bulb or 2 outside? Because it's dark when we leave. You know, people don't like you sometimes. when you leave these meetings, and I am a little nervous walking out there in the dark.
Your license plate is.
Wait, so I have a question. 4 million for the roof at Easton Middle? Is that what that is?
Yes. So the state would participate, picking up the majority of those costs. And then we would go to the county council and request the $1.7 million.
Has that one already gone out for bid? I think it has, but I don't remember exactly.
I'll have to ask Mr. Schaefer. I don't know. I don't know if it's, I mean, he did not just pick that number off the top of his head, right? There's thought that went into that. I don't think he would have put it out to bid because he's not going to put something out to bid that he hasn't talked to you about, that he doesn't, isn't reasonably assured he might get some funding for. So that is his best guess based on something, but I don't know what.
All right, but it will go out to bid if it hasn't.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And they're very, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to get from the state, and the agency name changes all the time. I can't think of the name of the agency at the state, but it's through the IAC. Okay, yes. Yeah.
Do you know what is not on this list? It's something we have talked about a lot. You know what I'm going to say. It's the chairs in.
Oh, that's not here. That's not here. And that's not here. That's, okay. I mean,
Isn't the question who owns the auditorium?
no,
Did we
we've
know?
resolved the question. We own the auditorium. It is an Easton High School auditorium.
Great. Then we should put new chairs on here somewhere in the closer to now than 3034 or 2034.
You don't want to wait 9 years for,
What's the electric bus infrastructure? Are you going through that?
so we had a presentation. I don't know if it was, I don't think it was for the 26 budget. I think it was 25 budget. And in prep for that, we had a study. We spent some money. We had an engineering firm come out and price out for us what it would cost us just to put the infrastructure in to charge a certain number of buses. And I'm not going to remember the exact number because it would not be practical for us. There are limitations as, what an electric bus can do. So it was for a certain number of routes within the town of Easton, and it would be, when these buses come up for their 15-year replacement cycle, phasing those in. And we have not purchased any electric buses yet. The cost was huge. I mean, it was, I don't recall the cost. It was a significant cost to put in that infrastructure. And it may be that this cost is even a little bit scaled back.
It looks low to me compared to what it was the last time we looked at this. And when this came up again for the board members who weren't here, we decided to table it.
The cost of the buses themselves, now you can lease these buses, but then, you have pretty significant lease cost. The cost of these buses, and Mr. Schaefer and I have spent, not recently, but for a couple years there, we were spending quite a bit of time talking to a couple different organizations that you could lease these buses from. And they're just, significantly more expensive than buying a conventional bus outright. So it was just cost prohibitive at that
Personally, I
point.
think we need to table it again. If they're
Yeah, so we're not
making us-
voting on that. This is more of a FYI, long-term outlook. If at some point we are mandated to implement electric buses, we can't do that if we don't have the infrastructure. So just kind of keeping that in our minds, I
But
guess.
so far, there's no mandate on it, right?
No, you're able to get a waiver for whatever mandate there is. That's where we are.
Because with our county being so outlying, electric buses are not the answer.
work for a lot of our routes. There's the charging time versus the route driving time. It just would not work. You were correct, based on what we've heard and been presented. Okay, so any questions on next year? So really what's going in for next year is that I hear question on, wow, that's a lot of money for the Easton Middle School roof replacement. Agree. And then some work on this building. And we can, we can put something in for, you can vote and tell us to put something in. We'll, in the meantime, be looking for cost for the chairs. Okay, no problem. I hesitate to bring this up, but I will. We have money set aside that's good for a certain number of years for field improvements. We have not included anything related to field improvements because we've handled that in a different way. We looked at options for turf fields, excess of $1 million, maintenance costs, things like that. So I'm pointing that out there. At some point, those funds will expire. I'm wondering if, I'm just putting that back out there in the universe.
Designated just for turfs? You can't use it for something else?
I think we were fairly generic in how we worded it. So field improvements. It would have to be a capital project. It would have to be worthy of a capital project. I mean, it's not aerating the fields or something like that, but.
Instead of a field, chairs.
Oh, no, it's literally written in the Talbot County legislation as field improvements. Somewhere there was a bleacher, although that's in a gym. I was thinking if that was related to an athletic field, that could be, I don't know.
Can you refresh my memory? I know you guys talked about that, and there were funds, right?
No.
Ish.
Oh, a
And
small
then-
amount, like
okay.
about $130,000 for a multi-million-dollar, or well over $1 million project.
Oh, okay.
Huh? I think it's under two. I think it's
so it was $1 million project, and we got
Plus.
100,000, something like that. 1.5
So-
million.
We were given a proposal for how we might approach it. And we had the way that we were given our funds for capital projects that year, we were given a lump sum by the county council, and they said, do with this what you will. And
Wasn't nearly enough.
it was enough to either do a turf field or everything else on the list, and everything else was important. So there was a discussion, and we decided to take part of what they had given us in that year and put it towards field improvements at a
Everywhere
later
else.
time. So
Oh.
we can continue to add to that if we want. If we want to say this year, we'd like to ask for another whatever to add to our growing pot towards that, or we can take the money that we have up to a certain amount of time and put that towards field improvements at any time. We can try to be creative around how we fund it, but it would require the board deciding to make something like a turf field a priority.
I only mention it because it's not enough funding to, it would require a huge investment. It's not enough funding for us to do anything, certainly with artificial turf, but it will expire. I think it's going to expire at the end of 2027. So I think we had a 3-year window. So 25, 26, 27, I think it could be one more year. Just throwing it out there to make you aware, because I don't want you to 3 years from now say, wait a minute, you never reminded us about that.
Do we need any more equipment for keeping the keeping the fields? up
I
to
don't know that would
premium
qualify for
quality?
capital, but that's something to look at.
So these are funds that the county council allocated to us for capital budget, is
A
that right?
general amount for capital projects for 2025.
Is there any outdoor seating that needs replacement?
That's a question.
There's a playground
I
replacement.
mean, does any of the outdoor fields need new bleachers or anything like that?
We also
So
could
I'll-
explore the idea of not artificial turf, but like a higher quality turf, natural turf, which I'm not sure we had a price to put that down. I think we had talked about improving the natural turf that was there and then seeing from there what the next step would be. We would have to decide which field we were looking at. I mean, most likely it's the football field, but does that serve everybody's needs if we do a really high quality natural turf in there? Do we now have the equipment capable of taking care of it long term? I'd be curious about all that.
Yeah, I don't know. All good questions for Mr. Schaefer. I mean, I think the quality of the fields is, from what I understand, really, really good now. So,
Did the robot, was that included with the robot to paint the fields? Is that included in this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah, we have a robot. I know at Easton High, and we just bought that. I think Sports Booster. I take that back. I believe Sports Boosters may have bought that. Maybe.
Before we move on from the fields, should we devote some more time to talking about this? I know the board has changed in its makeup since the last time we had a robust discussion about fields. Is this something that people are interested in revisiting and hearing more about? You guys could have the presentation about the costs. Is that something we'd like to dig into at a future work session?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we could think about what funds are available and what the current needs are in terms of the fields. And even if it is equipment and we had to ask for some sort of a modification to the legislation that they previously provided, if it's a rational request, it might be that there's some flexibility in how they could treat that. I mean, I know it's a different category from a capital to an equipment or.
It's actually a special it's capital enabling legislation that they pass, so it is going to be restricted to capital. I don't think equipment is going to pass. It has to be a capital project. I can
just didn't know
ask
if
the
there's
question.
any possibility for a modification, in that at any point in the future. I mean, I don't know that we have to worry too much about that yet because we haven't formulated what our needs are. But I think it's certainly worth looking at what our needs are and what funds are available.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Mr. Schaefer about what possibilities we could fulfill with that money that would be capital, whether that's seating, whether it's lighting, whatever it may be, scoreboards, I don't know.
Yeah, and I would like to know how we could honor the original intent of it, which was to move towards a turf or turf-like field for our athletes. So hearing about options that would be available, but again, revisiting the original proposal so everybody is up to speed with what we're looking at. Maybe that's a future work session.
I'm also glad to hear that it sounds like people feel like the fields are moving in a positive direction. So, and that you're seeing, we're seeing results. So I think that's great.
There were only 3 of us involved in that original conversation, so I definitely think it's worth digging back into.
So one more question, then what about rent, if say we went to the turf, what about renting it out? Is that,
We've
you-
done
to
a lot
recoup-
of looking at that, and it's for one field. The fields that are successful are sports complexes, multiple fields. They typically have natural turf and a few artificial turf. It's, one field. It ends up, it did not seem realistic that we would recognize enough revenue. Debt service, just to make the board aware, the county council will be paying $5.2 million on debt service on bonds related to construction at Chapel, the building of Easton Elementary, and the St. Michael's Complex back in 2015. Food service fund, there was a question earlier about food service. So we charge students that are not free and reduced for lunch. We make a la carte sales. A few teachers and staff purchase. That comes in our cash sales. We get reimbursement revenue, and end up generally making an operating profit, but then we invest money back into equipment. And we actually have too much money in our fund balance, in our food service fund. And so periodically I will get a letter about once a year, I guess, and they'll say, please make an attempt to spend your food service fund. So we typically have done that by investing it in our cafeterias. We have refreshed the cafeteria lines and equipment by the end of this year, it'll be at all of our cafeterias. So we actually use some funds to pay for kitchen equipment at chapel to help offset the cost of the chapel project.
Before you move on from food service, I saw a presentation at MABE, I think I told you guys this at the time, from Caroline County, and their person who is in charge of their food service, she knows you know her. It was incredible what they are doing in the county next door with food service, using local providers, sourcing local foods, creating healthy foods that the kids wanted to eat. It just blew my mind. And it spoke back to the way that I grew up, which was Vermont, which was very local, organic, whatever. But that was how I grew up. It was like someone's grandma in our cafeteria cooking healthy stuff. Anyway, I thought it was awesome. And to hear that we have funds that we need to spend, because I know it would be a huge lift if we wanted to consider making a move. But I would throw out there, I think that it's worth exploring as an idea, knowing that they're county right next to us. Yes, their funding is different, but their program was just absolutely incredible.
So it's like homemade? It's like farm to table?
Well, kids, so, it's a special thing to recognize that to a degree too.
Yeah. Let me see how to say it. It's like a whole different sub business. Currently food service is under the finance department, and it actually pays for about a quarter of my salary and half of salaries. So it's a focus for us, just delivering with the support of an outside organization. Once upon a time, it was in-house, and I know there was a director of food service operations, and there were, we had all the food service employees here. So that's just that's something to consider. It would be a big shift.
Has there been any consideration for the elementary school? I'm not sure if the middle school has water as an option for those small select kids who cannot drink milk, who may have an allergy or adverse reaction rather than having nothing or whatever they bring.
It's a Maryland law. It's a USDA, a federal law, that water is available within a certain number of feet of a cafeteria. That's something that's investigated every time we're audited to make sure that that's available, and it is. Yep.
So do they have to go outside? I'm trying to imagine but
it has to be within so many feet of the doors of the cafeteria. We have to honor documented food allergies, but we do not honor food preferences. You don't love milk, okay, but if that's a required component of your meal, we're going to offer you milk. You're allergic to milk.
Saying, for those kids who have an allergy or
Right.
adverse reaction, which there are plenty of those types of children.
and we monitor and track those. There's a plan for that, and that's all in their profile. Yeah.
So that would be, so that you're saying like a water bottle availability.
A water bottle, small water that those types of children would be able to have access to, rather than having to go
out in the
outside of the
hallway,
cafeteria, fill my water bottle up, come back in and have my lunch.
I'm not sure if they may or may, I don't know. I'll find out if that's currently offered or not. I don't know the answer to that. Inside the cafeterias? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your response.
I said there are water fountains inside the cafeterias with water bottle fillers.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask, students if they can, let me know if they actually have access
Okay.
to them.
And we can
that would
double
be
check
good
as
to know.
well. Yep.
Good to hear. Our last, I think, slide is again sort of just one of the things we do. The Midshore Special Ed Consortium, we call them the consortium or MESIC, is housed here. It's a partnership between 4 counties to provide special ed, specialized services, therapies, and so it's a pool of those therapists, and they're going out and treating kids in all the counties. They come up with a common budget, and the cost is split equally among the 4 counties. So there is a line item in our special ed budget for our 1/4 share of this budget, but we're in charge of the maintaining the books and records.
And we are getting ready to have a meeting, I want to say next week. They meet with all of the superintendents to update as to what they're doing and kind of give an overview once a year on everything under this umbrella.
That is your budget presentation.
I have a technology question. So I'm going to go out on a limb and be a little radical. Did we talk about how much we're spending on computers, iPads for elementary, middle, high? And, chargers, like what I would like to see, like what is that entire expense?
So that's I just want to make sure I'm clarifying, line item expenses for iPads for students.
Yes, the iPads that the students are registered, that they are administered in elementary, middle, and high school. And then the expense of, that we need the chargers when they break, all of that. And I'm asking because I would like to see less use of computers, iPads, especially for elementary, when we're talking about raising our literacy rates, when they need to be writing more and reading more books, and the iPads for our elementary school students. I'm just curious as to what is the overall expense. I know that teachers are dinged for using paper. There was a teacher that said she was dinged for using paper. She's an ELA teacher in middle school. So that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah, we can get that number.
Could you show me the slide with demographics?
Have you had any preliminary discussions with anybody from the county council about how they're feeling this year? Do they know where we're at? What's the lay of the land in 2026?
Bleak. I mean, and I think, like I said, the overall thing that I hear is that the state is pushing down to local. They're just kind of just pushing it down where something they used to pick up. Now they're saying locals, you take care of it. But that's one thing, hopefully. And, I meet with them monthly now, and next month, hopefully, you could join us to get in front of that, just to find out, to let them know kind of these are the things where we're kind of thinking about, talking about, wanting to have this meeting first to say, okay, now this is where we are.
So I saw somewhere, probably Facebook, and you know how accurate that is, that there was a county that invited their county council members to substitute for a day. So maybe that might be a suggestion. And I said it out loud.
Now, I do know we have a joint meeting the 20th, I want to say. So that'll be an opportunity as well to bring up any conversation. I know we're going to be talking about the blueprint, which are, they're looking at data in all of the districts as well, and have expectations. So that'll be a meeting where that will come up, and we'll be talking about that. But we'll be together next week with council.
I would like to see demographics from last year versus this year. That's what I'm after.
Oh, so a comparison. Okay, so we can give you that and all the different Because I think we've shown slides before. We could just pull that of the last 3 or 4 years.
When we have our other breakdowns in other areas on special education, does that include the 504 plans, or is that just those numbers up here that are for special education?
This population right here are identified that they have IEPs, not 504 plans.
I just have maybe an inquiry in regards to the special education program. Has there ever been maybe discussion with local colleges who have disability and support programs and how TCPS students are coming out and enrolling, how they're doing, what the gaps may be in that transition to ensure that we're putting our, funds in, good places? I'm not sure if that work has already been done or.
You mean the special ed kids that graduate? Is that what you're talking about? Are they, and when they go on to college?
Yeah,
or-
Salisbury. I'm not sure if maybe Delaware State maybe have some disability and support programs, but
Okay. To see what that transition is like.
yeah, what that transition is like. Are our students prepared? Where are they?
Staff person whose job is to transition students from high school to life, I guess, post high school. And that's her entire, well, I don't want to say her entire job, but that is like her focus.
Yeah. So what
And
is
I know
his or her
IEPs
reflection?
We'll have to invite her and let her share that.
Okay, so maybe when Mrs. Minchez comes to give her presentation, that's something we could hear as well, because we're putting money into the special education program. I would like to ensure that we are enhancing, that subgroup of population in that transition.
My understanding was IEPs transferred into colleges too.
I think that goes along with something that Dr. P had mentioned earlier in the year with the portrait of the graduate is following our graduates to find out more specifically what they are doing, what they're achieving post high school. So I would like to know in doing that work, if you could dig into the subgroups like you're saying to find out more specifically, not just, hey, one random student, but like what kind of success are we seeing on a like demographic level?
Are you including like recent high school grads coming back and talking about their experience as well? And
So that's because we have to figure out the mechanism to contact, go to the contact information we have of those students, then to communicate with them to get them to, and I think it would be easiest coming up with a form for them to fill out so we can kind of galvanize all of that information in one like Google Doc or information to see.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to know, 1 year post grad, what are you doing? 5 years post grad, what are you doing? What does success look like to you? 10 years out, what are you doing? What are you up to? What does success look like to you? And then for us, who are you? What does that mean for the work that we're doing on this end? Like Ms. Strawberry was saying, what sort of demographic bucket do you fall into, and are the interventions and programs that we're putting in place helping you? Eventually, this is a long-term project, clearly, but
I would love that.
okay. More questions from Ms. Jones about the 26-27 budget. Wow, that sounds weird. Okay. Anybody else? It's been quite a meeting. We will see this again and again and again. This is the first time, but not the last time.
Thank you so much
Okay.
for all the detail and thoroughness of this report. We have a lot to digest, but we really appreciate all of the information.
I've heard that the board is interested in a very, very brief presentation on this. 3 slides, maybe Wednesday night. What is your expectation? You don't want to revisit this in detail on Wednesday night. You just want it to be introduced so that you can, but maybe you'll have questions by then too. So we could certainly talk about those. I don't anticipate us having, certainly all of these answers. I'm not sure how many of these some of these are longer investigative things. Some of these may be quick answers we can come back to you Wednesday night with.
So would you want our questions before so you can be prepared to answer Wednesday? Maybe.
Yeah, I think if that would be great.
And even then, maybe or may not be something we can answer on Wednesday, but
Yeah.
absolutely would welcome
well as-
them ahead of time or at the meeting, both. Yes.
Yes, I don't think we need to revisit all 90 of these slides. I think giving people some time to marinate on what was presented tonight and then really just opening up for questions. This was a robust presentation, and I think should anybody want to revisit, it was captured on video, and you can go back and fast forward through to the points that you want. But yes, that would be my expectation, is just a quick overview. 3 slides sounds great, and then just open it up for further discussion. Okay.
Can you provide us with the slides from the presentation?
It's down to the wire. I mean, this was like 4:45, you know.
That we definitely didn't get them prior.
That's on me. Those are Sarah Claggett. Yep.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much for this evening. We're going to go ahead and adjourn. We will see you all back here on Wednesday. Thank you very much, Mrs. Jones, for this robust presentation.